My name's Ron. I'm chair of the Education Committee for ISPS, which stands for the International Society for Psychological and Social Approaches to Psychosis. So we're very interested in understanding a variety of approaches to the experiences that get called psychosis, because not everybody likes that label. But we're really happy to have Dmitriy here today because he's a person with lived experiences of hearing voices, a lot of voices, so that the experience that gets called psychosis at least, but he's found a way to live successfully, and he's also found a way to be very involved in organizations that are bringing a different approach to hearing voices, especially the Hearing Voices Network in New York, I believe. I forgot to have his little, but he's also written a book recently, Living with Voices. I think Living with Voices, A Guide to Harmony, is that it?
Harmony, yeah.
Yeah, so I always like to have people that just written a book come and present their ideas, and then people can follow up and read the book if they're interested. But I'm really happy to have you here, and you can say the rest of the introduction, all the things I left out. So go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. So as Ron was saying, I've been hearing voices quite some time, since 2009. So within those 11 years, I also have a full-time job, digital marketing, family, and that's really because I found a way to incorporate the experience into my everyday life and kind of navigate all the challenges, distressing voices, problems with attention, confusing beliefs. And so now it's just kind of a non-issue, but I am actively involved in trying to help the rest of the community share strategies and support so that voices can be the experience that any of us want it to be, that we kind of own the narrative of what's happening to us. So for this webinar, I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to focus a lot more on the specific strategies and techniques that I've discovered over the years. I will start off with a brief introduction of how I think about hearing voices. And then at the end, we'll have time for a question. All right. So Life with Voices, A Guide for Harmony. How do we find peace with voices for those of us who hear them? And how do we bring this experience into harmony with how we want to live internally and also with our community? So let's dive in. So first thing, I'm going to use two words that I normally don't like, but the irony is appealing to me. I'm going to do a quick reality check. 8% of people hear voices on a regular basis. So this is not a rare phenomena. It's not, 1 in 1,000. It's very common. Really? Yes, really. As much as 8% of the population reports experiencing auditory hallucinations on a regular basis, 13% at least occasionally. So just to kind of set that as the baseline of our conversation. There's also a lot of studies that voices are only as bad as what they say. In a lot of other cultures, they're guides and mentors. Even locally, they could be inspirational and good conversational partners. Of course, sometimes voices can be distressing. They can force your attention or threaten you. But the overall key to quality of life while hearing voices is the relationship between the voice hearer and the voices. And there's some studies to support that. We'll get into it a bit more later about trying to build positive relationships compared to ignoring them and trying to be rid of the stimulus altogether. Now, when we talk about how voice hearing is perceived in our society, at least the society I'm familiar with here in America, it's very feared and kind of very discriminated against. And as we wonder about that, is it because it's a unique perceptual experience? And the answer is no. People with synesthesia, those who can taste music or kind of hear colors, there's nothing actually negative about the social perception of them. Is the fear of hearing voices based on strange beliefs? Again, no. We have people who are Wiccans on the rise and being socially accepted. Even people who are in a community of flat earthers in general can talk to others and maintain good social relationships despite the strange belief. So my interpretation of kind of where the conversation on voices is a result of game theory. Essentially, once you have this idea of a disturbed voice hearer who's a threat to others, everyone who doesn't fit the profile has a lot of incentives to not come forward, to not stand in the light with our experience. And this kind of creates a chain reaction because the people who are outed as voice hearers are very often those in crisis or at their moments of adversity, compared to all the times where they're able to live life like any other person. And of course, with providers, not saying anything negative, but providers interact with the members of our community who are going through crisis most often. And again, meet us often at our worst moments of crisis, when we're essentially outed beyond our control because of confusing beliefs or distressing situations. And so that kind of also reinforces this incorrect archetype of a disturbed voice hearer compared to the reality that it's 1 in 12 people who do it. It's about as common as blue eyes. Okay, and I did want to also quickly say, with 8% of people hearing voices, less than 1% of people qualify for a label of schizophrenia or psychotic disorder, even though I have a lot of issues with those labels to begin with. The point again is that most of the community is very different than this narrative that is being fed in media and movies. Great. Okay, so how would I explain hearing voices? And no, it's not like wearing headphones. That was a pretty popular metaphor at some point. But hearing voices is not random like headphones. Voices actually comment on our lives, talk to us, about us. So it's something similar to being trapped in Twitter or social media, is how I would describe it. There's a stream of posts, your stream of consciousness, that is clearly labeled as your own. And then there are posts, communications, that are clearly labeled as other. Hearing voices, whether you hear it with your ear or have another experience with it, there's that feeling of otherness to a communication. And just like Twitter or Facebook, people tend to be a bit more mean and judgmental. In the West, voices also follow the Facebook rules of what's acceptable and not acceptable to say. Another way to describe it is the waking dream, where imagine if you had the same dream every night with characters and story development, and over time you came to really care about the characters in your dream. Because the storyline was consistent, you would start to feel emotions for them, feel connected to them, care about them even. Voices are like that, at least for me, where it has that feeling of realness that happens during a dream, but it's happening during waking life. Now, in order to kind of get you as the viewers to think about what it's like to hear voices, do me a favor, kind of look up in your room or wherever you happen to be sitting, notice something that's yellow, blue, or red. Take a second to look at it, or really any color. Okay. Physics, at least the physics I remember from high school and confirmed since, color is created by the brain, meaning you are not seeing something that is actually there. What is there is wavelengths being absorbed and reflected, patterns of light. But the brain is converting that into color. So it is happening inside you, not outside you. Take another moment, 3 seconds, to look at that object and to really internalize that. Try to accept within yourself, to the depths of yourself, that it's not there. My guess is that most of you are struggling with this. You're almost insisting naturally that your senses are correct, that the world as you perceive it is truly there. There's some resistance. We know that certain cultures, like the Himba tribe, don't see the color blue. If you were to show them 9 squares, some green, some blue, they would not be able to point out the different ones. Their brains do not convert wavelengths in the same way as ours do. So when we talk about hearing voices, I think it's very important to remember that it's truly experienced. The way that you are seeing color in the world around you is how voice hearers hear voices. It's generally part of our life experience. Now, this isn't talking about it being an internal source, medical model or external source, telepathy or spiritual, whatever it is. It's just the fact that it's part of our everyday stimulus, just like you are seeing color. With that, I kind of want you to ask yourself honestly, if you were 1 in 12 people who saw color and most of society didn't, would you be able to let it go? Would you be able to truly accept that, no, this isn't actually out there, you know, I have to ignore it, or any of the other things that we're often told about voices. It's a lot easier said than done. And kind of with that, I try to raise this issue of compassion, that regardless of what model you believe in terms of what voices are, we have to accept that it is truly experienced, that it is part of the stimulus flow of people who hear voices. And asking people to ignore their stimulus, go against their senses, and let go of how we are raised to perceive reality is a very big request. It's a big ask. It's not easy. It's almost like asking a loved one to switch political stances, right? Or anything else that's really deep and internal. So the normal narrative of just ignore it is about as effective as telling somebody to just ignore the experience of seeing color. So with that, my tools and strategies focus on creating a positive voice ecosystem. You know, with color, we're able to incorporate it into our lives. It's not a big deal that we're seeing something that's not truly there. Again, without commenting on what voices are, but with color, it's not a big deal because we're all doing it. So we're able to build a fashion industry around it, do marketing designs. It's incorporated into our lives because it's shared. We're able to communicate around it. We know how to deal with it. That kind of knowledge for voices is unfortunately very lacking. The focus has been on pharma, mapping, some techniques. You know, there's a rise of like, you know, therapies that are designed for strategies with voices. With most people who hear voices not even needing therapy, there's a broader conversation that is missing. How do we incorporate the stimulus into our lives? How do we make sure that voices are an encouraging relationship that respect our boundaries and rules, and that those who hear voices don't end up with the confusing beliefs and damaging choices that are the media stereotype of our community? Okay, so let's dive in. First, let's talk about, you know, the big stigma, discrimination, whatever word you want to use, of voices, and that's confusing beliefs, that voice hearers don't have a grasp on quote unquote reality. And as incorrect as it is, I want to focus on what the challenges can be and some techniques to make sure that things go smoothly. So year one of voice hearing is really about trying to figure out what is going on, for many of us, at least for many voice hearers I've talked to. You know, I use the quote jokingly, is that you, Mr. President? We're getting a new stimulus, and it's not one that we are raised to understand or are really given any tools to view in a way that we can incorporate into our lives and then leave behind, like, you know, stop worrying about it. So year one is really, what is happening? Is this an angel? Is this a demon? Is this telepathy? Is it medical all along? We have a stimulus and the explanation for it doesn't sit well with us. That kind of gets to the no exit point. Voices are absurdly good at providing reasons and arguments for why they're real. Meaning, as soon as you point out a plot hole in their story, they'll come up with a counter argument for how they could still exist. And that kind of makes the back and forth of trying to agree on a single model, internally agree on a single model, very difficult. Even if you become fully convinced of medical models, saying, oh, this is illness, this is my subconscious, whatever you want to see the medical model as, you're still experiencing the world. Just like you're seeing color right now, voice hearers still hear voices. And the realness of that experience, the stimulus that's entering us, our whole bodies react to perceiving stimulus as a true part of the world. So it's kind of, if you fully lean medical model, you're still going to wonder if it's something else because you're experiencing it. If you fully believe in a different model, spiritual or telepathy, well, everyone in society tells us that it's medical. So it's a very big back and forth, a rabbit hole of what's going on. And kind of the successful voice hearers most often are the ones who are able to let go, not the ones who are definitively able to say, this is 100% medical, or the ones who are able to say, it doesn't actually matter. That question is not important. The important question is, can I live a happy physical life of my choosing without voice hearing being a negative experience? So how do we get there? For me, the kind of biggest point of getting to that place of being okay with voices is a positive feedback loop about their inability to physically hurt you. So unlike trying to figure out what's going on, where there's always going to be new arguments and new theories about what's happening, the more you're convinced that they can physically harm you, the more distressing voices in theory should be motivated to physically show up, to show you that yes, they can harm you and you need to be scared of them. But they never do. Whatever model you believe in, the voice steering community is connected enough to know that voices never physically show up. We would send a tweet loud to the skies to each other that we finally met one of our voices. So kind of the more that you believe that their powers, if they have any, can never affect the physical world, the safer you feel, the more motivation they should have to show up physically to correct you, but they never do. And you just follow that positive feedback loop all the way through to a place of knowing that you're safe. That whatever the voices are saying, however you want to navigate those conversations, you are the one empowered in the experience. They cannot actually do damage. Now, the two roads of dealing with voices, one is this positive voice ecosystem where you build a harmony with them, set rules, avoid the pitfalls that can cause damage. And the other road is kind of trying to ignore them until they go away. In some senses, it makes sense. If you develop a habit of not paying attention to them, the stimulus could be like the colors of the cars you saw earlier in the street, if we weren't in COVID lockdown, or any other stimulus that kind of doesn't really make it to your main focus. There's tons of stimulus every day around us that we actually ignore and are able to successfully ignore. And for some people, their brain will rewire that if they ignore voices, voices would go away. On the other hand, telling somebody to ignore voices can be like ignoring the elephant in the room. They hear it. It's genuinely experienced. So with that, of course, people are bound to engage. Some people because they want to, because it's a positive experience. Some people because they can't ignore it. For many different reasons, the option of ignoring voices compared to building a relationship with them is a non-starter. It's not realistic to expect people to go down that road. Okay, so where does confusing beliefs with voices come from? Well, imagine being raised by Google, which hopefully will never happen to anybody in our species. Although, I'm sure Google would probably do a decent job, I don't know. But the point is, whatever you type into Google, you're gonna get those results back. And I'm using Bigfoot as an example. If I type into Google, Bigfoot is not real, I will get tons of articles that say Bigfoot is not real. He's been disproven, there's no evidence, yada, yada. If I type into Google, Bigfoot is real, well, all of a sudden I'm gonna get articles on forensic experts claiming that they found proof and all that. The point is with Google, whatever you type in, you're gonna get back those results, at least some hits for those results. And with voices, it's similar. They can provide arguments and reasons for pretty much anything, sometimes very convincing ones. So essentially, whenever you start to believe something or explore a belief, if you listen to the compelling arguments of your voices, it could go down a road that leads to confusion and possibly damaging choices. Now with that, I want to very much differentiate between strange beliefs and damaging beliefs, right? Believing that there's a spiritual nature to the world. Completely fine. A lot of communities have strange beliefs in the form of, many things. I was going to say that every community has the belief of religion, which can't actually be verified. I don't want to quite go there. But the point is, having to prove all of our beliefs is not the nature of humanity. It's okay to have strange beliefs, whatever they might be. But there is a line between that and damaging beliefs, which is when you say, oh, not only are the voices rocks, but they're actually invading rock Martians, so I have to dedicate my life to stopping. And we'll get there. But the point is, whatever beliefs you have as a voice here are actually still linear and rational. Even the spaghetti monsters make sense. Meaning whatever you believe, you got there one thought at a time. You don't just suddenly believe in spaghetti monsters. It's a chain of logic at partial rationality, which then gets reinforced by the arguments that the voices make. Spaghetti monsters solve my whole voice story. If it is spaghetti monsters, then the rest of it perfectly makes sense, because that's what the voice is arguing. And that voice sounds like it makes sense. So when talking to voice hearers, please don't think that things are just sporadically coming out of nowhere. That one day we believe in rocks, the next day we believe in aliens, the third day we believe in talking food. It's not like that. And everything is gotten to one thought at a time and with rationality. It's just a question of whether we're correctly interpreting the arguments that are coming our way. And a lot of people who hear voices actually get really deep insights about the nature of the world. You know, earlier I mentioned game theory. Nash built a beautiful philosophy of humanity from his conversations in part with voices. So it's not like every conversation goes to a place of confusion. We could really get some beautiful ideas from talking to voices, but we have to be careful about this confirmation bias. So there was a study done by Al Powers, Phil Corlett, and a few others out in Yale that showed one of the biggest factors of voice hearers who are in distress compared to not in distress is whether we lock into our beliefs. Meaning once we believe something, once we say, you know, for me, I think it makes sense that trees have a spiritual nature to them, which is completely fine belief, nothing wrong with that. If somebody was able to provide new perspectives, new insights, new evidence in a different direction, would we be able to let go and reevaluate our belief structure? And the answer is the ones who are able to do that, the ones who can have conversations with their voices, pursue beliefs, but then just let go and reevaluate, tend to be okay in terms of not having what they themselves would call a low quality belief structure. It's really the people who lock in and kind of solidify each idea and are unwilling to let go of it that kind of end up in trouble. This is actually supposed to be updated. So the title is not breaking up with the medical model. That's an outdated title. I apologize for that. The actual title for that point is supposed to be The Downsides of Pathologizing. It's not me, it's you. So very often with the medical model, there's this question of, if we tell people, are your voices telling you to hurt yourself? Are your voices telling you to hurt others? Within the medical model, you're building the profile of how voices should behave. You're setting the belief expectation for what a voice is. And in a sense, that is also a feedback loop that can create this negative relationship. Past that also, telling somebody that voices are strictly within themselves often leads to self-isolation. People trying to solve their own head in this endless rabbit hole of, is it real, is it not? I know a lot of voice hearers who have, let's say, a spiritual perspective, and they're able to go out on hikes with their friends, and they see a waterfall, and the waterfall talks to them, and they say, oh, you know, I feel at one with nature out here. And then they go back and they have their day job and their families. And I wanted to just take a moment to say that that's fine in terms of having a strange belief and living a full life. I think, at least, is better than kind of believing in the medical model, but self-isolating and trying to solve everything because you're focused inward. And again, I apologize for the title. I didn't mean to say breaking up with the medical model. This an old version, I guess, didn't update. But it's more that pointing out the downsides of treating it as strictly internal at all times and the harmful effects that that can have. Okay, so how do you go out and explore beliefs as a voice hearer without getting into too much trouble? Well, the first thing is you have to feel safe in talking about what you're going through. And for that, I recommend degrees of vagueness. So for example, let's say I told you, hey, I'm fighting this demon that's trying to take my soul away. That would cause a lot of raised eyebrows. It sounds pretty weird. I admit it. It's a weird thing to say. I mean, maybe, but who knows? But the point is, if I said, oh, you know, Earth is a battleground between angels and demons who are, you know, trying to shift, the battle is trying to shift our souls to heaven or hell. That's a community of nearly 1 billion people, or at least hundreds of millions of people. See, all I did was take the exact same conversation that I wanted to have and made it a little bit vaguer. And with that, I would be able to talk to people in the religious community, with friends, about the overall philosophy of the storyline I'm experiencing. Similarly, let's say I said, oh, technology is spying on me. It's collecting my information. Hi, Mark, as in Mark Zuckerberg. If I said that about an individual, like I'm being spied on, again, raised eyebrows. If I said, I really think that technology is collecting data about people. Well, that's correct. It's how marketing works. It's all a lot of megadata is being collected about us as we speak. So again, I'm able to talk about the conversation that's really central to my voice hearing experience without coming off as strange and alienating my community. That's why degrees of vagueness is such a big part of this. Now, in terms of the benefits of community, social isolation causes its own form of distress. Not being able to share what we're going through creates drift. It's almost like we're in literally different headspaces than those around us. So let's say you're even in a conspiracy model, and you're able to go talk to a watchdog agency, here watchdog, good agency. Exploring what's going on with you externally keeps that connection to the world, keeps that community, is able to offer these new perspectives and insights from which you can grow and essentially find peace with whatever your voice storyline is. Also, with degrees of vagueness, the broader the principles you consider with voices, the less likely you are to feel like a certain detail is creating a very high urgency and to act in a way that damages yourself, either by breaking the law or by breaking a friendship because you get caught up in a detail. So in my experience and with those I talk to, exploring broad principles of your beliefs, even if they're coming from voices, tends to not actually lead to damaging choices compared to getting hung up on the details. Cool. Probably the most important word in exploring beliefs with voices is good old maybe. So fact or fiction, or how Swiss watches ruined my life. In the West, we have this very commitment to precision, commitment to knowing exactly what is the truth. Can we agree on what is being said in the most precise way? And this drive is actually really devastating to voice hearers, because a lot of the things that voices say, we can never verify to an absolute precision. Are they definitely a medical model? Are they definitely have no external capacity at all? This rabbit hole is a Western phenomenon. In cultures where they're more okay with ambiguity, being able to say, okay, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but I'm going to live my life, is really allows people to kind of break free and live how they want. So there's also this idea of, oh, don't believe anything the voices say. Let go of everything. And what about if your voices say you are loved? And the doctor says, don't believe anything they say. Okay, so back to maybe. Kind of high stakes gambling, nothing is as dangerous as a sure thing is one of the sayings. Whenever we believe something very precisely, that's when we tend to make these damaging choices that go out and really get us in trouble with law or with community and do things we can't get back. But whenever we believe that, oh, everything's kind of in a state of maybe, we're less likely to make those kind of decisions that will cause long-term damage to our lives. And with that, I kind of wanted to quickly call out, the big Descartes, I think, therefore I am, is the only thing we can prove. And this leads to kind of a subset of a skill that we can use with voices. And that's to say, okay, if everything's in a state of maybe, if we're never able to actually definitively prove anything, as terrifying as that is, it also means we can let it go. We can, again, be okay with ambiguity and accept that I don't need to find the truth of every single thing that I'm hearing. The voices want to tell me that they're rocks. I'm not going to pursue exploring, is that true, is that not true? Who cares? At the end of the day, the only thing that we could definitively prove is I think, therefore I am. Then whatever. Let the voices say whatever they want. It's all maybe. I don't even have to engage with these strange beliefs. So the last point is I want to talk about genies, of all things. Let's say that you suddenly found a genie and granted you 3 wishes. What would you wish for? There's actually an objectively moral choice of what to do here. And it's not only to do what Aladdin did and set the genie free on its 3rd wish. It's to set the genie free on its 1st wish, because you're coming across a being that's trapped for whatever reason, and you're kind of forcing it to do your bidding on the hopes of you giving it freedom on the 3rd wish. It's kind of a very weird dynamic. I bring this up to kind of say there are beliefs that we've already attached ourselves to, constructs that we believe as a society that we kind of miss what's obvious. And the need to resort our belief structure to say, okay, this is definitely true, this is probably true, this is maybe true, this is probably not true, is very important for us to kind of re-examine the choices we have made in our belief structure and to get back to a behavior pattern that we ourselves are okay with. Moving on in terms of either way, the idea is that, well, if you're releasing the genie, what if it's an evil genie and then it goes out to destroy the world? What if it's Jafar? So if you release an evil genie and it goes destroy the world, that's on you. You made the wrong choice. With voices, this is actually a much more common scenario than you might think. Not literally Jafar and genies, but this idea of what's the right thing to do. Should I release the genie? Should I not? Or whatever the storyline is. And here's where something either way comes into play. Say, for example, you say, okay, genie, I release you to do anything you want as long as it is within human law at all times. With that choice, you've solved both possibilities, that it's a good genie or a bad genie. You're doing the right thing. You're not risking all of Earth, but you're also not keeping track this celestial being that you've encountered. So either way is kind of the big approach to voices and whatever they say. Let's say you have a nature voice that is telling you, oh, unless you support Mother Nature, I will destroy you and your family. Well, an either way choice is to start recycling. Whether you're talking to nature or not, you kind of solved it. A not either way choice is to go out and let the air out of the tires of the local logging company. If you do that, you're in trouble with the law. You didn't actually solve the possibility of it not being actual nature. So maybe and then sort and either way are great tools for navigating the experience of voices. And they kind of keep you out of most of the more damaging trouble that you could get into. So with that, and talking about beliefs, I want to take a moment to actually say, voice hearers believe, very many of us, in something other than the medical model. And this struggle between our community and the rest of society, I want to take a moment and point out why it exists. It's not only because voices are genuinely experienced the way that you're experiencing color, it's also about the history. The decision that voices were a medical issue, happened thousands of years ago, before anybody knew modern physics, modern science of any form. And all of these other models were never truly explored, fully explored by academics. Sure, an academic here or there looked at trying to prove a spiritual model, but so much of the resources have gone to reinforcing the medical model when it was based on a science of a time that didn't know that it was possible at all to have data come in when nobody was around you. So what are the different models? Medical model, telepathy, thoughts of others, spiritual model, ancestor, we're talking to those deceased, technology, alien, or conspiracy. So is the conversation truly finished about what voices are to begin with? Scientific American hyperscans show how brains synchronize as people interact. Our brains synchronize during a conversation. There's a lot of kind of challenges with thinking about anything other than the medical model. For example, in a telepathy model, why are the voices consistent in their content and character, regardless of physical location, right? If we were picking up the thoughts of others, then the voices should change if we're in New York or California or Spain. They should be different, but most often they're not. On the other hand, you've had hundreds of millions of people observing an experience and telling you that to them it feels real. All good science starts with observation. And you have literally, over the last century, hundreds of millions of people saying, hey, I'm experiencing something, and to me it feels real. And very often we're told to let go of that belief by people who have never been through it. So with that, I don't want to present a clear answer. I don't want to say, oh, definitely is or is not medical, but I want to say there is room to continue the conversation about what's going on. For voice hearers in the present, I think it should not truly matter because it's not a question that we ourselves will solve. not without help from an organized academic community. Too many of us have gone through it, and we never truly resolve the, aha, definitely here's what it is, I can prove it. So instead the question is, can this hurt me? How do I become the center of power in my experience, setting rules and boundaries with my voices? And how do I reclaim my abilities for attention, happiness, and community? And I want to take a moment to point out, Louis Pasteur, the creator of germ theory, here was a guy that said, what's making everybody sick is millions of little things that none of us can see running around. And of course he was called crazy in his time. People were saying, no, illness is spontaneous. It just happens. It has nothing to do with these millions of little invisible things, Louis, you're insane. And of course now we know that he was right. So this is almost a question of dignity. It's not about saying, oh, I believe in telepathy or the spiritual model. It's a question of saying, I am not going to shut down the voice here in community's beliefs about what might be happening when I can't fully prove my perspective either. Meaning medical model is not able to say it's precisely this part of the brain lighting up in exactly this way we know it, we're able to solve for it, these neurotransmitters. Let's keep the conversation open and let's have respect and dignity for the very many beliefs about what is happening. With that, I want to move to conflict and how we navigate conflict with our voices. So it's very easy for people to say, oh, just ignore whatever they're doing. Their threats can't hurt you, but what's the acceptable risk on this? Let's say you think that there's a 1% chance that voices are real, 99% chance that it's medical model. Meanwhile, the voice is saying that it can hurt you and your entire family, that if you don't do what it says, it will, break the legs of your mother, or whatever it might be. Even with a low chance of reality, what's the acceptable risk of you not doing anything, of you not responding or becoming consumed by it? Because the stakes are so high in the conflict with our voices, we feel very compelled to take it seriously and to respond. And that's not something that we can just let go of. Now, when voices are being hostile, they have their own motivations. So no one's just a jerk for no reason. Voices, like people, are motivated by perspectives, emotions, their agendas, their cost benefit for achieving their agendas, the opportunities they have based on what's happening in your storyline. The most common motivations for hostile voices are either their own emotions, they're reacting out of pain or anger, or they're just trying to harass you as a second category, but that's the nature of their personality. Very often voices have agendas. They have things that they want to happen in their storyline, in your ecosystem, and they're kind of focusing on the cost benefit of how they achieve it. Rarely, in some dangerous situations, voices are simply power hungry. They're trying to take over, whether your body or your ecosystem or a broader community within the storyline, if that's the storyline of the voice. Sometimes voices are hostile because they actually think that you're in their storyline. They don't even acknowledge that you're the person and they're attacking you. They're saying, oh, you're inside my spiritual framework. But the point is, once you understand that a hostile voice has its own motivation, you can navigate towards peace. In a sense, you have to navigate towards peace because if you're engaging with voices, you're stuck with each other. Did they just hang up on me? No, no one's leaving, in that sense. You're stuck with the voices are stuck with you. You essentially have to eventually work out harmony. If you are unwilling or unwanting to ignore them, then it's really the only other option. And there's kind of a rise for techniques like IFS that focus on the benefits of a positive relationship with your voices. But it does need to be more of the conversation. Now, with that, when voices are attacking you or threatening you with abilities, there's kind of some good techniques to get around it. Say, for example, a voice throws a fire attack at you, claiming that it will burn down your whole house, or that it will burn your house. Now, the initial instinct might be to, I'm going to put this out with a water image. Or I'm going to find a way to block this attack. The issue with these approaches is that you have to believe yourself to be stronger than the voices in order to overpower their attack. And that's not always the case for our community. So instead, a really good trick to piss them off or to win like mental judo, is to define their attack into a specific manifestation, as I call it. So let's say the voice says, oh, I'm going to burn your house. You go and do some cooking. Your stove was on fire. You make a nice dinner. That's it. Voice's attack fulfilled. The feeling of the threat will likely pass or could pass because your house technically was on fire for a moment. The stove was. By defining the voice's attacks into physical world manifestations, even pursuing your own motivations and passions is a good way to win without ever having to worry about being strong. I'm going to rephrase that a bit because it's a complicated point in a way. Let's say the voice throws fire at you and you really enjoy playing piano. You could say, oh, well, I'm going to take that fire. And for me, fire is similar to passion. I'm going to go play the piano. There's actually a lot of flexibility to convert the attacks from our voices into physical activities that will sharpen our skills and give us joy. And we'll never lose by being weaker than the voice because it's its own attack. Just we decide what it means based on the vagueness. Kind of the last point here is how much power do we give our voices to begin with? If they talk to us, let's say while we're in the restroom, sure, that can be humiliating, but over time we have the choice of how humiliated we feel about it, finding an inner peace with our experience. So it's always this balance of if there's an injustice from our voices, do we have to pursue it? Do we have to get them to stop? Or can we just let go and say, everyone has different fights in this world. You be you, voice. I'm going to live my life. And kind of being able to say, truly, I know these threats will not physically hurt me. And because of that, I'm going to let it go. And I'm not going to give you more power than you actually have. Whew. So with that, a focus on happiness. Voices are sometimes very mean. They say really distressing things. They could be crude, vulgar, try to incite crime and all these things. I remember I had a person in one of the groups that I facilitated come in and say that his voices were constantly trying to tell him to go out and hurt others, as the stereotype that sometimes actually does exist. And what I did is I pointed out to him, when I say book, you say zebra. I use different words, but the idea is our brain lights up millions of associations in every single situation. Literally, when I say book, your brain lights up all these different things. Your favorite authors, recent movies that have been, converted from a book, all these things, paper, trees. Often in the medical model, especially, these associations become a central you. They reach consciousness as a unified thought, which is your stream of consciousness. In the medical model, the fact that there's a new outlet for how voices can take the subconscious that is rejected by central you and still say it only shows that you're not the one who's vulgar or crude. So, what I'm trying to say is if you were crude and criminal and vulgar, it would be backwards. You would want to hurt other people and your voices would be telling you to stop. So again, in the medical model specifically, the fact that central you, your stream of consciousness, is maintaining morality only shows that that's who you are as a person. The fact that your voices are telling you crude, vulgar, or criminal things doesn't actually reflect on your goodness in any way. And of course, not in the medical model, the crude, vulgar, criminal things aren't you at all. So kind of in all possibilities, don't let the negativity of voices make you feel bad about yourself. And that kind of moves to the second point of let them say what they want. Don't worry about their remarks being a reflection of your personality or changing your personality. Be okay with hostile voices or distressing voices saying really horrible things and put it in the background. Who cares? And I know it's easier said than done, but over the long run, harmony with your ecosystem also means not taking negative things personally. At least that's my experience. Confidence, not arrogance. Again, if you're stuck with your voices, even if they're mean, they're stuck with you too. So working out a relationship and getting them to be more positive over time is definitely a goal I recommend. In the long run, you could talk to only voices whose company you enjoy, on topics that you like, and only when you're not busy with something in the physical world. This is a real goal that you can have, and it's pretty key to happiness. If voices are mean, you could work out a better relationship. Again, with that, being told something negative by voices is more of a marathon than a sprint. Over time, they will wear you down. And it's important to kind of have support structures, people who can raise you back up, or activities that you enjoy. And I want to take a moment here and again say, not everyone's voices are distressing. A lot of people in the community have really motivational and inspirational voices, in relationship with voices. But whether that's your experience or not, you can get there over time. But know how to lean on support if you're going through a moment of distress. And for people who have past trauma or significant fears that the voices activate and use against you, I want to take a moment and say, this might not be the correct approach of ignoring it, or that might be really easier said than done. And that's where support structures can really be helpful to the experience. Let me just take a look at the time. Okay, so being mindful of the time, I want to say attention is a big issue with hearing voices. Keeping our priorities, even if we were in a telepathy model and we solved world peace, it wouldn't actually mean anything because nobody went out and did it, right? So in all these models, actions in the physical world are what move Earth forward, whether spiritual or medical or telepathy. Physical actions create impact, whereas solutions with voices don't, for the most part. And just reminding ourselves of that is a good trick to refocusing our attention to the physical world, where we can go live a life of our choosing. In terms of controlling our attention, there's also good habits. The more you're able to focus attention where you want it, the more over time it will be easier to do so. So prioritizing good habits is important. I talked earlier about living in the world, that even being with a talking waterfall and focusing your attention on that is better than kind of isolating in a silent room, trying to solve what's going on inside your own head. And with our attention, keep in mind that those of us in our community who care about us a lot are going to notice when we're being different. They're going to, the saying, only friends tell us when we stink and we need a shower. People close to you will notice when you're not paying attention, when your behavior pattern doesn't match what you were doing before. And it's okay when they point that out to us. It's important that we don't let our emotions from the voices, our anger, especially, build up and spill over to people in the physical world that we care about. So be mindful not only of where you're paying attention, but of how others perceive you, because having a community is really important during this experience. Okay, self, and I'm going to go a bit quicker on this slide. One other danger while hearing voices can be this feeling of losing our identity, an existential crisis, if you were. And it's fine. It actually happens to people who don't hear voices too. And a lot of people who hear voices don't go through this. But if you are struggling with this, keeping in mind your emotional memories, things that you've accomplished, and especially things from before your voices, is a good way to remind yourself of the center of you, to find yourself based on your past emotions and your past accomplishments. Also, there's no accounting for taste. So voices very rarely intersect with us in terms of sense of humor, dance, smell, and all these other things that make us unique. So focusing on these things is a great way to recenter, if you were. Okay. Yeah, I'll skip over. If you have particular questions about this, I'll put my email at the end. Feel free to always reach out if you have this specific dilemma or know somebody with this specific dilemma while hearing voices. There's a lot more techniques and strategies for it. So ecosystem, kind of getting to the final points, and then we'll open for Q&A. The more you know about your voices, the easier it will be to navigate them. And that means their motivations, but also their strengths, their weaknesses. Really, the more you know, the better position you'll be in to set the rules of your ecosystem. Keep in mind that for voice hearers, things happen with a given direction. So let's say you have a storyline that the voices are, I don't know, water spirits who are trying to resonate with the water inside your body, just picking one at random, a model. if within that storyline, you achieve peace with your voices, that will be the experience moving forward. So kind of, it's not random noise is what I'm trying to say. You could help people within their storyline and set the direction of the relationship, and it will stick. It'll be semi-permanent unless something changes the direction on the storyline again. Whatever the storyline is, moving it in a better direction achieves real results. And they're seeing this in the UK right now with avatar therapy, where they program a computer and AI to slowly de-escalate and move towards peace with voice hearers. And it works. The voice hearers tend to have more peaceful experiences on the whole. In some cases, if the avatar tells them that it's leaving and the voice hearer puts that as part of their storyline, the voices can even go away. So just really remember that the experience of hearing voices has a linear direction. And wherever you move the storyline, that's where it will be. Now with that, in terms of mapping, remember fair credit and fair blame. Events happen for many reasons. Things in your physical world aren't only because of voices. Things in your voice world aren't only because of voices. Everything kind of comes from multiple sources all the time. And if you're going to be setting rules in your ecosystem, you have to stay fair with both credit and blame. So how do you move your storyline with your voices in a better direction? Essentially, it's all about agreements. Think of it as kind of, you are the mayor of your own little ecosystem. You have to negotiate with your voices, develop a skill of not giving away things for free, but being able to set rules that are followed. Picking your battles with your voices, one hill at a time is really the key. You don't have to solve all of it at once. Just pick one thing that you want to agree on and reach that consensus. Keep in mind that even in the telepathy model, law exists, right? So communication laws, information laws in theory should protect you, and kind of reminding even spiritual voices that they're on Earth and they need to follow human law is a good way to make sure that you aren't being attacked and harassed, or being attacked for information stolen from you. The idea of the importance of law kind of actually works across frameworks and could really reinforce good behavior if you know how to pick this argument to have with voices, that they need to follow law. And lastly, the moral high ground is super important. If you tend to lie to your voices, if you tend to try to manipulate them, over time they'll grow more hostile on you, and they'll be able to recruit other voices if you have many voices to kind of join in the fight against you. Whereas if you have the moral high ground, you'll be the moral leader of your ecosystem and will win allegiance and friendliness from a lot more voices, especially if you have more than one or two. Okay. Impact. So over time, as you're moving the voice storyline, there's two things in play. One is how much effort you and your voices are putting in. And the second thing is influence. What is the impact per effort? So of course, hard work pays off if you actually actively work on changing your relationships and your ecosystem into a positive one. That will create a lot of impact. On the other hand, be mindful of where you have more impact per effort. So don't be smart about how you're putting in your effort. Don't challenge the water spirits in a story about water. They're going to be able to create more impact per effort than you are. But this comes into, again, reputation. The more you're the moral leader, the more you have kind of a position of authority with your voices, not only will your effort pay off, but you'll be able to achieve more impact per effort. A big part of this is amplifying allies, having voice allies, and going further together. And lastly, kind of harmony. In theory, remember that if you're stuck with your voices, they're stuck with you. And if they have an agenda, if they have a cost-benefit calculation, or even if they're operating from a place of emotions, in theory, harmony is good for all of you, the voice here and the voices. And so if you could just point out why it's best and pursue it together, that could create a better ecosystem. We could skip the slide for now. It's about kind of choices in the ecosystem that can create damage over time. So for example, if you leave your voices no choice but to be hostile towards you, they're likely to exhibit that behavior. If you do something really mean to them and they hold a grudge, that's also damaging. But on the whole, try to be, again, a moral leader in your ecosystem and focus on apologizing to any voices you have hostility with and starting over. In the long run, harmony is good for both the voice here and the voices, so it is something that can be achieved. Cool. Last slide, and that's to say that if you remember one argument to pick with your voices, I recommend it's that they can't force your attention when you're within 10 feet of somebody you care about, or that they can't force your attention at all. In general, a lot of the damage from hearing voices comes from it being an opportunity cost to other things in our lives. But if voices only talk to you at night when you're not doing anything and kind of aren't forcing your attention to begin with, those conversations tend to be more positive value and less damaging. And it really is just about picking an argument and moving it forward. Don't try to solve the whole thing at once, and be fair. Just like you would want your voices to change and to kind of adapt to your rules, sometimes you have to find inner peace with them being different than you and having different perspectives, just like you would with other people that you happen to be stuck with. So keep that balance of pushing for outer peace of how they need to change, but also pursuing an inner peace of accepting them in ways that are different than you are. In the end, it's almost like a symphony of dreams. Everyone has their own purpose, their own motivation. Often, just like in the physical world, these come at the expense of each other. So one person pursuing their dream is at the expense of another person pursuing theirs. But if you could work out a symphony of how everything is growing together, how everyone's dreams could be achieved in harmony, that's kind of where you have this positive voice ecosystem that will continuously add value to your life without causing any damage. So I think I'm going to open it up for questions now. I just want to say that this is a very important movement. And for voice hearers, you can standardize your experience. You can write down your problems and your answers and share them. And it's really important to know that the more we talk about it, the better our experience becomes. That kind of the main pain points for voice hearing usually are the quality of the relationship, how society treats us as a whole, and problems with attention or confusing beliefs. And that solving just these four things would make it a really positive, not only neutral, but positive experience that adds value. For academics and providers, please see the value in lived experience and kind of how we have solved our problems. Take a look at maybe collecting some of this, validating it, and saying, oh, hundreds of millions of people going through something will, of course, have come up with valuable insights on the topic of their greatest mastery, their own lives. And maybe there's broader patterns here for how one person's solution can actually help millions of people reach a similar place of happiness. For families and loved ones, please again remember that the experience is genuinely being experienced, just like the experience of color. Everything is still linear and rational, although it might be not that higher degree of rational and might not lead to beliefs that actually make sense in a broader sense. But keep in mind that your family and loved one member is still there, and you can still talk to them. Just be respectful of the realness of the experience and try to help them within their own framework to get to a place of this positive voice ecosystem. And again, for society as a whole, most of our suffering, in my opinion, comes from just the social discrimination. If it wasn't there, we'd be able to talk to each other, share strategies, share support, reach out if we need help when we first need help, instead of kind of waiting for when things are pretty bad for some of us. So changing the discrimination is the factor that will improve quality of life for 8% of people. So 1 in 12. So that's what, tens of millions of people just in the US, hundreds of millions of people globally. It's a big issue. Please give us the dignity that we deserve simply as being humans. Give us the benefit of the doubt on our strange beliefs as we deserve by virtue of all of us having strange beliefs. And kind of have faith in us that we can be rational, fully living human beings who hear voices with friends, families, jobs. Voice hearing doesn't have to mean anything. It's just an extra stimulus. And we can help each other make it a positive one, but it doesn't take away from our overall humanity. I'll open up to questions before I do. If you want to support me as I'm working in this movement, My book, Life with Voices, A Guide for Harmony, it's selling decently well, but it needs more Amazon reviews. That helps me book speaking engagements and give this talk at colleges and other places. So that's kind of the main thing that I would ask if you're interested in helping me and my part of this movement, is Amazon reviews for the book right now is what I need. But other than that, just it's more about doing your part to give respect to voice hearers everywhere. Okay, and with that, I think we're done, and I will open it up for questions.
All right, well, thanks a lot. I was wondering if Symphony of Dreams might be your next book, but that's not really a question.
Right.
I like that phrase. So there was that question I kind of intruded when you took the little break about you were saying voices don't physically show up, but what about when they really seem to be physically there and causing pain, or people feel even like at an energy level, their body's being torn apart or something like that? Any hints on how to cope with that physicality that sometimes people experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit outside of my personal experience, but I have talked to many community members with that experience. The first thing is, again, be mindful of how much power your voices feel like they have and how much you're giving them. So I don't only mean like, allowing a voice to control part of your body, or because some people do that and then it kind of creates that experience. But in general, when voices attack us, whether it's spiritual, telepathy, medical, however you want to see it, at the end of the day, they're using data, some form of data, to create an impact on your life and your happiness. Whether that's a magic spell in some frameworks, or a subconscious push or a subconscious feeling, it is data that is creating impact. And how much impact that their data creates, is partially up to you. If they're triggering things within you that are allowing them entry, if you're kind of feeling guilt, and because of that, a voice is able to kind of make you feel negative emotions, there's a journey of inner peace here as well, is what I'm trying to say. And the more that you find harmony with whatever these voices represent in all models, the less negative impact they can have on you. And I very much recommend not doing that journey alone, whether with family or friends or support structures. But in all models, whatever damage the voices do, part of it is working on external harmony with it and getting it to stop, but part of it is finding internal harmony so that it can have less impact per effort.
Okay, yeah, that could be a whole subject in itself, probably.
Yeah.
Well, Mary was wondering just how long it took you to get to the point where you're at, because she's saying she has a teenage daughter who's currently being in a unit and being told that, the voices are psychosis and all that. And how does, for example, she's wondering as a mom, how does she say, well, maybe the voices aren't bad if you figure out how to deal with them, but her daughter's getting a very different message. But
Yeah.
so I guess there's maybe two questions there. How long did it take you? And also, how do you talk to somebody who's being told that the voices are just pathology?
Yeah, so I think it's such a big point to talk about prescribed hopelessness. I want to address that even before I get into the specific question. Most of the voice hearing community is able to live lifestyles of our choice. Most of us are. So keeping that hope and faith alive is critical. I will say that, especially in the medical model, if you tell somebody that their voices are going to win and are going to be attacking you for the rest of your life, you're setting that expectation, and that's the content and character of the voice you create. So there's something fundamentally wrong, even within the logic of the medical model, about that. But in terms of the specifics, I would say it's really about empowerment. It's about having the person have faith that they will win over their experience, that they will navigate their storyline to a place of harmony, and then taking the problem by chunks, writing down, oh, I'm having trouble communicating with other people and focusing. I'm losing some of my friends. That's a problem in my life. Oh, the solution is, why don't I write them daily emails, share social media things, which I could do when I'm not in a moment of conversation with voices. It's really just about saying, this is actually a manageable problem. If it is a problem, let's break down the different things that are causing damage and brainstorm together the solutions for it. And you'll be able to tackle them one problem at a time. So yeah, in terms of how to help your daughter, I would say without judgment, without kind of forcing a narrative on her, explore within her own framework, her problems, and brainstorm solutions and just tackle them one at a time. For me, I started that approach of standardizing my experience about 1 year in, 1.5 years in. By 3 years, I knew instantly how to react to any problem and solve it within seconds because I was just familiar with my experience to that level of expertise that, oh yeah, I've seen this problem before, here's the solution. That was that. But be careful of the hopelessness.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, someone commented that they hadn't thought much before about how maybe professionals can actually get in that loop of accidentally increasing stigma, because they talk about stigma a lot, but they maybe aren't so aware so much of the sometimes when they're actually saying things or doing things that increase it, and it's something to really be aware of.
Yeah, so for professionals, and I have a lot of respect for people who dedicated their professional life to helping the community. You know, I'm not trying to make this an us for them. It's not what I believe at all. I'm grateful, truly. But I will say that one of the biggest things is how we enlist family members, or how family members are enlisted by professionals into the lives of voice hearers. Family members are essentially our closest, most important, if we're lucky, support structure. And them becoming the watchers of, are we talking to ourselves? Are we deluded? You know, turning them into watchers of our behavior and medical compliance can cause a lot of damage, in terms of our relationship and our connection to the world. So maybe in terms of the feedback loop, I think the biggest point I would say is keep the voice hearers spiritually close to their loved ones. Don't create a watcher dynamic, because that can cause a lot of damage. And in terms of the broader stigma and kind of broader conversation of the community, I think, honestly, if you're asking that question, you're already probably doing the right things. Just being aware that, hey, yeah, there's kind of a misconception of the experience. And when we talk about it, we have to be mindful of the actual diversity of how it presents.
All right, thanks. Heather wonders, like, what strategies for when the voices seem completely unwilling to engage, like if they only do one-way communication or if they appear completely non-negotiable?
Yeah, so it happens. And look, let me ask you, like I said earlier, last time you were outside, you saw cars, right? What were their colors? What were their license plates? I couldn't tell you. There's so much stimulus that we learn to ignore because we treat it as not important. I do think that on the whole, voices have meaning and they have things to communicate. We can learn and grow from understanding the messages that are being said. But if a voice is just stubbornly refusing to engage, or is like a negative and consistently a negative, I think there is a place where you can just let go and say, okay, this is kind of an annoying voice. Who cares? I'm going to put it in the background and train my attention to be able to be where I want it to be. And that is something you can do over time, is train your attention. Yeah, if it's not worth it, just like you wouldn't invest all of yourself into a person in your life who's not engaging and growing with you, don't invest all of yourself into a voice that isn't willing to grow together too.
Yeah, and another thing I'd throw out there is sometimes just speculating, you know, like, okay, you keep saying this, I wonder why you might be saying that, and then just thinking about why it might be saying that, and maybe approach it a little, and it might even, if it thinks you're misinterpreting it, it might decide to comment on that. But you also might figure out like what's fueling it. I know, I don't think of myself.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say, I don't think of myself as hearing voices, but I sometimes have repetitive automatic thoughts that pop in that that it's hard to communicate directly with them, but if I reflect on it, I can think, well, what's that trying to say, or where's that coming from? And I sometimes come up with something, and that moves the whole thing forward.
Yeah, I was going to say, I usually, I go 1 degree of vagueness out and then kind of zoom back in. So let's say a voice is telling me that a person in my life is trying to hurt me or something like that, right? I'll go 1 degree of vagueness out and I'm going to say, okay, do I feel like anyone is trying to hurt me in general? And then I'll say, do I feel that? Do I honestly feel that? And I'll say, oh, you know, I do feel like maybe this person at work is kind of in the way of my ambition or something weird. Thankfully, that's not my situation right now, but zoom out from the actual message, consider the broader topic, and then explore either yourself or with a support network.
Okay. Somebody asked, what do you mean by having information stolen from you?
Oh, sure. So if there's a feeling of otherness, you know, that the voices are non-medical model, then the idea is like when you have a thought, they try to take credit and then put it out somewhere in the world. So it's more of a non-medical model phenomena, where you feel that they're breaking into your head to take data, and kind of the importance of, in that model, if you feel like data is being stolen, you could remind your voices on the existence of law, because even if there's no laws about voices, there's laws about information. And so kind of it's an easier argument to win in general with your voices, that they need to respect human law, regardless of the model.
Okay. Mary Ann wonders about if you have any brilliant ideas for engaging or motivating somebody that hears voices to like look at books or listen to talks or get more informed, because I mean, how to just motivate people to do that? Any ideas?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to a lot of our experiences are unique, so it's person to person. I would say that, let's say a pretty common thing is that voices feel very high stakes, you know, the grandiosity of it. Reminding somebody that things actually happen in the physical world, you know, that sweeping the floor accomplishes more change than solving world peace with a voice, because the world moves forward through physical action, is a good way to kind of redirect attention. But it's really about, I would say, being there as a community and being willing to do those things together, you know, without judgment, without making everything a push for medical model and getting the person to acknowledge an illness, but just spending time together. And then kind of the more you have in your life that isn't voices, it's also a positive feedback loop. The less place voices have in your life, the easier it is to do more that is non-voice related. And also just pointing out, you know, the issues of confirmation bias, you know, even in the telepathy model or many other models, you know, you're limited to what you can hear based on what you already know. So just pointing out the feedback loops and echo chambers and the danger of it, you know, identify person to person. What is the reason that it's becoming a consuming issue? Is it because the voices are threatening my family? Is it because the voices feel really grandiose and high stakes? Is it because, you know, I'm solving a problem here and, you know, I'll live life once I solve it? But go person to person, just be pragmatic, figure out what the actual issue is, and then brainstorm a solution. And I know it's a lot easier said than done, but a lot of us don't do it.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Ursula asked, can you provide an example of how you standardized your experience? Because I think you used that phrase, standardizing something.
Yeah. So let's say even communication with voices, right? There's three kinds. Either I send data to them, I move the voices to data, or I kind of change our ecosystem so that they'll eventually intersect with a message. This is kind of one of the more useless examples of standardizing an experience, but I think maybe somebody will find it useful. But just thinking about this overall pattern of what's happening, how do I identify the patterns in my experience? For example, a more important one is, why are hostile voices attacking me? Is it because they're responding to their emotions, anger and pain? Is it because they have an agenda? What is that agenda? It's really asking the right questions of what is happening and writing down the patterns. And then once you identify the patterns, just figuring out, oh, over time, these are the solutions that work for me, writing down the solutions. And then when that problem happens again, you have the solution ready. Because even though there's a lot of diversity, both between our community and within each person's experience, there are patterns, and over time you could figure out how to best address those patterns.
Yeah. Jim says, voices take credit for what I do, accompanied by a dominance physicality, depriving me of authenticity with the projects I'm doing. Any ideas about how to address that experience?
Yeah. So this is something that I'll probably have to learn more about the details of. I'd say there's kind of two things that come to mind. One is, again, giving them more power than they have, in the sense that if it is a voice that takes credit and goes out and even does the same thing somewhere else, getting to a place of saying, you know, who cares in terms of my company at work, they're giving me credit, or kind of being okay with it is a journey that I would consider. But again, I don't know enough of the specifics. The other thing is kind of when voices intersect with us, from what I've heard in the community and my own experience, it's kind of similar to an intersection rather than kind of an either or. I'll tell you what I mean. Like, let's say you're feeling angry or you're feeling proud. You know, that's a Dmitry angry experience or Dmitry proud experience. Let's say there's a voice named Susan. Again, I'm making up names. I don't have any Susan. Intersecting with me, and we do something, and she takes credit. That was either way a Dmitry Susan experience, just like a Dmitry pride or Dmitry anger. And noticing that we're intersecting rather than like it being either or, you know, again, it's kind of a Western thing of like, it is either me or the voice, and being okay to say, oh, this was actually both of us to a degree, and being okay to share the credit in terms of the amount that each of us contributed to it, is another thing that comes to mind.
Somebody's saying that they've met people who were too scared to talk about their voices, let alone start working with them. And that's what they found more difficult. Any comments on that? I think a lot of what you said already is addressed, just creating a safe climate to talk about voices, because that's a huge thing.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm particularly active in Hearing Voices Network USA. And, you know, there's 100+ groups nationwide where people talk to each other because, you know, it's places with no judgment. It's people where whatever you say, you know, we've all had things that we were scared to say or thought we would be judged for, and having that kind of environment. And it's been shown to really help these groups. Of course, a lot of people have fears that, oh, they'll lead to confusion or damaging choices, but no, it's all the studies and all of my experience says that it's actually just a safe place for people to talk, and it feels really great to get things out that we wouldn't say otherwise, and to get feedback from others. So yeah, Ron, it's exactly like you said. It's just about safe spaces, and again, easier said than done. Love to continue the conversation about the specifics. If you want to email me afterwards, I'm at my first name dot last name @gmail.com.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the more people have, like, the system gets all freaked out about voices, that creates an unsafe environment. So partly it's about a fear reaction. The system has its fears and gets all like, ah, and then that amplifies other people's fears. It all makes it hard to talk. So the more you can kind of like, okay, let's create a safe place and not overreact and be curious. So yeah. So the next question, there's a couple questions about using drugs or substances. So Heather's wondering what's your opinion on both pharmaceuticals and herbals or supplements and their role of helping people functioning. And then Teresa's wondering if a person can stop using antipsychotic drugs that they're taking for problems with voices, if they can stop them safely. So I thought maybe you could try to answer those together.
Yeah, absolutely. So first I want to preface that whatever expert by experience I might be in terms of, and that's a term, by the way, it doesn't mean I'm an expert, it's just the title of what it means. It's like saying somebody who has lived experience. Pharmaceuticals are not part of my study. So whatever I say right now, do not take as medical advice, strictly an opinion. I do not know how the balance of chemicals would play out, but I do still want to say something. So with that humility established on the topic, I think modern pharmaceuticals and herbals and supplements is kind of like a dartboard. It's this group of people remind me of each other, and for some of them we have seen this approach work. So let's try a bunch of different things and see if it works for you too. It's kind of very different from surgery, where you come in and the surgeon says, oh yes, this exact part of your liver needs to be cut out with this very precise tool. It's not like that. I think that pharmaceuticals and herbal supplements are an option. For some people, they do help. For some people, they help less. For some people, they help more. For some people, they don't help at all. I would say be honest with yourself about whether it's helping or not, and whether you want to keep trying that as the approach for how you find, you know, higher quality of life, and kind of know the other options as well. You know, the roads to harmony. I don't want to comment more than that because it just completely, I think it does require study to talk about the level of chemicals and whether there's a safe way to taper and all those questions. So I'll stop myself there just out of humility.
Yeah, and Grace put a link to a video about this subject, so there's more you can find on the internet. See, Heather says, in community mental health, we're trained to ask folks if the voice is telling them to hurt themselves or others. And you mentioned that this can set up a negative dynamic. So what would you suggest if there's a better way to address this, or should the therapist just not go there at all, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, so I think that it's a great question. I think it is an important question in terms of preventing worst case scenarios for people who are undergoing, you know, suicidal ideation or anything like that. But I think that asking this question directly creates expectations for how voices behave, and can kind of really damage the experience. So I would say if it could be studied, a way to ask this question of what are your voices like? What are they talking about with you? You know, are they motivational or harmful? Are they telling you to enjoy your community or to be negative to your community? Kind of set up both possibilities in every question so that you're not influencing the expectation of how a voice will behave. I think that one of the reasons, you know, there's many theories for why voices in other societies, especially in the East, tend to be more positive. But this idea of setting up the expectation for how a voice behave would be the most medical model explanation for why Western voices are more hostile than Eastern voices.
All right. And Lorraine asks, if voices are connected to past trauma, does the trauma need to be addressed if the voices can be managed?
That's a big I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, one thing I would say about that is that often if you're really working with the voices in a friendly way, and if they're about trauma, the voices will often bring up the things that need to be addressed. And if you're being cooperative with the voices, you might just start cooperating with that and sorting through the experience just as part of the process. So I think it's, you know, like Eleanor Longden, somebody mentioned her in the chat already, but I heard her once describe it, because she's somebody that heard trauma and then started having voices. But she said that her problem really was that she had tried to bury the trauma. And she said, the problem was that I buried it alive. She buried it alive and it came back in the form of voices. And at first she was just trying to lock them away. And she said, it's like if a bunch of people come to you and they've got a problem with you and you just try to lock them in a closet and shut the door. Well, what's going to happen? Well, obviously they get more mad at you and they get more nasty. And so it was actually learning to listen to them and appreciate them and that they had something to contribute, not take them literally, because often they said stupid or even horrible things, but they were clues to something. And so part of the process of managing the voices better was, you know, being willing to hear what they had to say about at some level.
You know, it's every voice, even in all models, it represents a part of what the world is like, right? Like there's no voice that is saying things that doesn't correspond to any part of the world. And, you know, basically where I'm going is there's no such thing as wasted effort in trying to find peace with your voices. Worst case scenario, you'll get better at finding harmony with physical people and, you know, your negotiation skills and kind of your understanding and compassion there. So just, I think that we need to eliminate that disconnect that there's nothing of value to be gained from voices. Even in the most medical model scenario, you're still gaining skills on compassion and harmony and understandings about things that you know, are relevant to your world.
All right. Well, I'm actually at this point not seeing more questions, and it's about the time we said we'd end up. So there was lots of people who have already said thank you in the chat, and they really appreciate this presentation and all that. So I really thank you for coming here and doing this. And I guess I'll leave the chat open for a little bit if people still want to share a few ideas back and forth. Any final closing remarks you want to make, Dmitry?
So yeah, bottom line again is our dignity as humans, and just kind of maintaining that in all interactions. Past that, if you want to specifically help me, the title of this presentation, Life with Vice, is a Guide for Harmony. It's also the title of my book on Amazon. Buying a copy, leaving a review would really help me go around to colleges and other places and book speaking engagements to keep kind of, moving things in this direction.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.